In 1893, the World's Columbian Exposition opened in Chicago. What visitors encountered was a dazzling, ephemeral city of light and monumental architecture, a white city that rose from the marshland seemingly overnight. It was hailed as a triumph of American ingenuity, a symbol of national ascent, a city designed not for permanence but for 3 glorious, industry-shaping months. That's the narrative, and it's largely true. Then you find the questions, buried in the periphery, in the personal accounts, in the contemporary architectural journals and early urban planning debates. Questions not about its beauty, but its function. Not why it was built, but why every single structure was demolished within 2 years. The official narrative of the 1893 World's Fair is presented as a singular moment in American history, an event that showcased innovation, celebrated art, and demonstrated America's emergence onto the global stage. Construction began in 1891, transforming 600 acres of swampland into a classical metropolis of gleaming white buildings, grand lagoons, and meticulously planned landscapes. Architects like Daniel Burnham and Frederick Law Olmsted orchestrated a spectacle that drew over 27 million visitors in 6 months, a quarter of the U.S. population at the time. The buildings themselves, primarily constructed with a plaster, cement, and jute fiber composite known as staff, were inherently temporary. This material choice is consistently cited as the primary reason for their demolition. They were designed to last only for the duration of the fair, to be a grand but fleeting vision. The cost of maintaining them was deemed excessive, and the land was to be returned to parkland. This explanation makes perfect sense and is widely accepted. It explains the purpose, the material, and the outcome in a clear, linear fashion. It's a story of intentional impermanence, a grand gesture. Here is where the official record does something I've come to recognize. It narrows. If you follow the thread further, and I want to be precise about how far I'm following it, you find a different kind of curiosity emerging from the discourse around the fair. Not about the demolition itself, but about the insistence of the demolition, about the rapidity, about the almost immediate erasure of every single monumental structure. Let's look at the financial incentives. While the staff buildings were indeed not built for permanence like stone or brick, their structure, often steel frames clad in the composite material, was robust enough for significant reuse. Many examples exist from other expositions, notably the 1901 Pan American Exposition in Buffalo or the 1904 Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, where large-scale buildings were repurposed, dismantled and rebuilt elsewhere, or simply left standing for decades, slowly decaying. The argument of cost is compelling, but the records in the Chicago City Archives and the Chicago Historical Society reveal a peculiar financial structure. The World's Fair was planned for and executed with an unprecedented, almost fanatical, focus on post-fair site clearance. Contracts with demolition firms were signed in some cases before the fair even opened. He never finishes those sentences, those initial planning documents discussing the future legacy structures. They instead shift to bland, almost insistent statements about returning the site to its original purpose as promptly as possible. The efficiency of this demolition was not merely a convenient side effect of temporary construction. It was a baked-in requirement, often prioritized above potential revenue. If you consider the reports from Dr. James A.B. Schurer, a contemporary observer and later a prominent historian of expositions, housed in the Huntington Library. Schurer, among many others, noted the peculiar speed and thoroughness. He explicitly questioned in his personal correspondence, why such haste? Why such an absolute wiping away of every trace, when the cost of disassembly and selective preservation would scarcely have exceeded such total destruction? Schurer notes how the demolition contracts included clauses stipulating not just removal, but also the pulverization of materials, specifically the staff composite. It's not just the rapid demolition. It's that you have simultaneous, independently constructed expositions and temporary structures built with similar materials, But the World's Fair exhibits this insistence on absolute, immediate erasure. They didn't consider adapting the materials. They insisted on their complete pulverization across all major structures. I want to return to Charles K. Warren, a civil engineer with the Chicago Department of Public Works, who was assigned to the electrical grid of the fair. At the time I mentioned him, he seemed incidental. He isn't. Warren kept meticulous journals, now digitized and available through the Chicago Public Library Special Collections. In an entry dated October 1892, a year before the fair opened, he describes a design meeting where a temporary, localized harmonic dampening system was discussed for the major exhibition halls, particularly the Palace of Fine Arts and the Machinery Hall. A dampening system, not for sound, but for vibrational resonance. This detail, dismissed by urban historians as an engineering quirk of early large structures, connects to an emerging pattern. I'm not arguing for some hidden esoteric energy field. What the evidence suggests is that the construction, the materials, and the rapid demolition were all part of an engineered requirement to control an unanticipated vibrational factor inherent in the very scale and design of the White City. Schurer's surprise at the insistence on pulverization, Warren's odd note about harmonic dampening, the preemptive demolition contracts, they all point to a specific intention. The fair, with its massive, open structures and its unprecedented electrical grid, created something unintended, a resonance. Consider the words of Ida B. Wells, who, in her 1893 pamphlet, "The Reason Why the Colored American is Not in the World's Columbian Exposition," noted the striking absence of African American contributions to the fair. While her critique was primarily social and political, she included a passing observation that the very air of the White City pressed on one with a hum that was both exhilarating and unsettling. A specific hum, noted by an observer focused on entirely different matters. The insistence on demolition, the pulverization of materials, the pre-signed contracts, the internal notes on harmonic dampening from engineers who never finished those sentences explaining what was being dampened. They all resolve to the same underlying concern. The White City was designed for an aesthetic, but it also accidentally achieved a unique large-scale acoustic or vibrational phenomenon, a sonic effect tied to its unprecedented size, its specific materials, and its vast electrical infrastructure. This effect, though perhaps initially unintentional, was recognized, controlled for, and ultimately erased. Because, while it created unparalleled wonder, it also created something profoundly unsettling, something they needed to disappear. The question isn't whether the fair was a triumph. The question is what triumph it concealed. The question isn't whether it was temporary. The question is what specific property necessitated its total, rapid erasure. The question isn't how it was built. The question is who decided you shouldn't know its other function. It feels like a door that someone very carefully closed.